Take him. I'm not missing this flight. Because you don't know how to handle one sick child.
Simone, he needs a doctor.
What he needs is a father who does more than hide in back rooms and call it work.
I want to tell you that I shouted, that I chased her down that jet bridge and made her look at what she was leaving behind. I didn't. I stood there at gate C-17 with my son's fever soaking through my shirt, and I did the thing I have always done when my chest is on fire. I went quiet. The gate supervisor, her name tag said Vega, kept looking at my coat like she'd seen a ghost. "Sir," she said, "is that—" She stopped herself again. "Never mind. Let's get your boy some help." I didn't answer her either. I just nodded and carried Micah toward the medical office at the end of the concourse, past 24 strangers who had just watched my wife walk away from us like we were luggage she'd decided not to check. By the time we reached the little airport clinic, Micah's cheeks were the color of a bad sunburn, and his breathing had gone shallow and quick. A nurse named Tasha Reed took one look at him and didn't ask me a single question about what had just happened at the gate. She simply reached for a thermometer and said, "Let's see what we're dealing with, little man," in a voice so calm it made my own hands stop shaking. 103.2, she said a moment later, frowning at the reading. "That's high, but it's not an emergency yet. I want him seen by a pediatrician within the hour, not the ER, unless it climbs another degree." She glanced at me. "Do you have someone who can meet you at a clinic? Someone besides—" She didn't finish that sentence either. Everyone in this airport, it seemed, had decided not to finish sentences around me today. "I'll call my sister," I said. "She's 20 minutes from Eggleston Pediatric." "Good." Tasha handed me a cool cloth for Micah's forehead. "You're doing fine, Dad. He's scared and he's hot, but he's not in danger. Not yet." Not yet. Those two words would follow me through the rest of that day like a held breath. While Tasha checked his ears and his throat, my phone began buzzing in my coat pocket. Not the everyday ringtone, the other one, the flat, insistent double buzz that only fires when a very specific line rings. The one only a handful of people in the country have the number to. I silenced it. Micah needed both my hands and all of my attention, and whatever the network operations desk wanted from me could wait 10 minutes. It buzzed again 40 seconds later. I silenced it again. Tasha noticed. She didn't ask, she just kept working, murmuring reassurances to a 5-year-old who had just watched his mother disappear down a jet bridge without looking back. I want to explain something about myself before this story goes any further, because if I don't, none of what happens later will make sense. My name is Darius Cole, and for 11 years, almost nobody outside a badge-locked operations floor has known what I actually do for a living. I tell people at parties that I'm in systems. I tell Simone's friends I manage logistics. It is not a lie, exactly. It is a silence I built brick by brick, the same way my father built his, and I never once stopped to ask myself what that silence was costing me, until I was standing in an airport medical office, holding my sick son and watching my marriage walk onto a plane. My father worked emergency flight coordination for almost 30 years. He was the kind of man who kept his phone face down at dinner and his coat buttoned even indoors, like the badge underneath it was a wound he didn't want anyone to see. Quiet men keep the sky safe, he used to tell me. Loud men get people killed. He gave me that wing compass pin the year before he passed, and I've kept it stitched into the lining of every Navy coat I've owned since, close to my heart, the way he wore his. I believed him. I believed him so completely that I built my whole adult life around the idea that if I simply did the work and did it well and never made a show of it, the people who loved me would eventually see the truth without me ever having to say it out loud. Simone was not one of those people. Not anymore. We met when I was 29 and still junior enough in the operations hierarchy that my hours were normal and my phone stayed quiet at dinner. She loved that version of me, steady, funny in a dry way, unbothered by other people's noise. She used to tell her friends I was the calm in every room, and she said it like a compliment. For a few years, it was. Then I was promoted, and promoted again, and the quiet that used to feel like calm started to feel to her like distance. She wanted a husband whose success she could see, a title people recognized at dinner parties, a name that meant something when she said it out loud. Instead, she got a man who left the room to take calls he couldn't explain and came home 3 hours late without an excuse he was allowed to give her. "You disappear," she told me once, 18 months ago, standing in our kitchen with her arms crossed. "Even when you're standing right in front of me, Darius, you disappear." She wasn't wrong. I had spent so many years being the man who solved things silently that I'd forgotten how to be a man who simply talked to his wife. I told myself the marriage would survive on the strength of my consistency. I was so sure that showing up quietly again and again would be enough. It wasn't enough for Simone. Somewhere in the last year, she started building a different kind of life. One with visibility in it, with recognition in it, with a man named Adrian Cross in it. A procurement consultant who wore his confidence the way I wore my silence, right out in the open where everyone could admire it. I hadn't wanted to believe it. I still hadn't fully let myself believe it, right up until the moment she put our sick child in my arms and walked toward a jet bridge with Adrian carrying her bag. My phone buzzed the third time. Tasha looked up from Micah's chart. "You should probably take that," she said. "I've got him. Go stand by the door if you need to." I stepped just outside the clinic door and answered. "Cole," said the voice on the other end. "Priya Anand, my deputy on the emergency operations desk. We need you, now." "I'm off duty until 4, I said. "I've got a family situation." "I know it's bad timing. It's always bad timing." Her voice had an edge I didn't like. "We're seeing an anomaly in the maintenance sign-off logs across 3 regional carriers sharing our ground infrastructure. It's early, it might be nothing, but the pattern's not clean, and you're the only on-call command lead cleared to authorize a network-wide hold if it turns into something. Define not clean. Overnight inspection timestamps that don't match crew logs. 2 tail numbers already flagged. I don't like the shape of it, Darius." I looked back through the clinic window at my son, small and flushed under a paper blanket, Tasha's hand resting gently on his shoulder. "Give me 40 minutes," I said. "I need to get my son to a pediatrician first." 40 minutes, Priya repeated, like she was writing it down somewhere that mattered. I hung up and stood there for a moment with my hand pressed flat against my chest, feeling the small, hard shape of my father's pen through the fabric. 2 emergencies arriving in the same hour, and only one version of me to answer for both. I called my sister Renee. She picked up on the second ring, and when I explained fever, airport, Simone gone, pediatrician needed within the hour, she didn't ask a single unnecessary question. "I'm already grabbing my keys," she said. "Send me the clinic address. I'll meet you there." 20 minutes later, I had Micah buckled into my car with a bag of ice wrapped in a hand towel pressed gently against the back of his neck. And Renee was waiting for us in the Eggleston Pediatric parking lot when we pulled in. She took one look at my face and didn't ask about Simone either. She just reached for her nephew and said, "Come here, baby. Let's get you feeling better." And something in my chest loosened half an inch for the first time all morning. "They're going to run a strep test and some blood work," I told her, handing over the folder Tasha had sent with us. "Fever's 103.2, not climbing. If it goes up, or if his breathing changes, call this number." I wrote down the pediatric urgent line, and beneath it, my own cell. "I have to go in for a few hours. Work emergency. I wouldn't leave him if it weren't serious." Renee studied me for a second, the way she has since we were kids, like she could see straight through whatever I wasn't saying. "This is the job Dad used to have, isn't it?" she said quietly. "The one you never talk about." "Something like it," I said. "Go," she told me. "I've got him. Go be whoever you are in there." I drove to the operations campus with my hands tight on the wheel and my father's voice in my head telling me that quiet men keep the sky safe, and wondering, for the first time in a long while, whether quiet had only ever been half of what he meant to teach me. The badge reader at the secure entrance took my thumbprint and my access card at the same time. Dual authentication, standard for command tier personnel. And the door to the network operations wing opened onto a floor I hadn't set foot on in 6 weeks. Rows of analysts sat beneath a wall of screens tracking every aircraft currently in the air across our partner network. Amber and green blinking softly across a stylized map of the country. Priya met me at the door, tablet already in hand. "2 tail numbers flagged this morning," she said, walking fast enough that I had to match her pace. "Now it's 5. All from the same third-party maintenance vendor, Howbrook Aerostructures. Their overnight inspection reports for 5 separate aircraft show sign-off timestamps that don't line up with the actual crew shift logs. Either somebody's clock is broken, or somebody signed off on inspections that never happened." "Who's the vendor rep of record?" I asked. She pulled up a contract summary on the tablet. Contact listed as a procurement consultant named Adrian Cross. He negotiated the accelerated maintenance contract 8 months ago. Cut costs, cut turnaround times, made the board very happy. I stopped walking. "Cole?" Priya said. "Nothing," I said, and started walking again, though it was not nothing, and both of us would learn exactly how much it was not nothing before the day was through. We reached the secure command desk, a glass-walled room overlooking the main operations floor, where a live feed tracked every aircraft affiliated with the 5 flagged tail numbers. 2 were still on the ground, 3 were airborne. One of the 3 airborne aircraft, according to the manifest scrolling past on the side monitor, was a regional flight bound for Dallas, carrying 41 passengers. I did not need to check the passenger list to know whose name was on it. I already knew the way you know a storm is close before the sky changes color. Simone had told me weeks ago, in the flat voice she used now for anything involving me, that she had a Dallas trip for work coming up. I hadn't asked which airline. I hadn't wanted to know. I asked anyway. Priya scrolled. Her face changed the way Marisol's had at the gate that morning. "Darius," she said carefully, "one of the affected tail numbers is on the Dallas flight departing this morning. Manifest shows a Simone Cole in seat 4C. The room did not spin. I want to be honest about that because it would be easy to tell you it did. Easy to make this sound more dramatic than it actually felt. It didn't spin. It went very, very still. The way the inside of my chest used to go still whenever my father got a call that meant he wouldn't be home for dinner. "We don't have enough to ground anything yet," Priya said, watching me carefully. "2 anomalous timestamps and a pattern that could still turn out to be a clerical error at Holbrook's shop. If you call a network hold on this evidence and it turns out to be nothing, that's your authority spent for nothing, and it's a black mark on the whole command structure." "And if it's not nothing," I said, "then we're running out of time to find out before more of those five tails leave the ground." I sat down at the command console, and for a moment I let myself feel the full, ridiculous shape of what was happening. 12 hours ago, I had been an anonymous man in a Navy coat that nobody at that airport gate recognized for what it was. Now, I was sitting at a desk with the authority to stop an entire regional network from flying. And the first real test of that authority involved the woman who had just walked away from our son without looking back. "Pull the full maintenance chain on Holbrook," I said. "Every signature, every timestamp, every inspector badge number for all 5 tail numbers. I want independent verification before I do anything, not internal paperwork that could have been altered." "That'll take at least 2 hours," Priya said. "Then we have 2 hours to find out if we're standing on solid ground," I said, "or if I'm about to make the hardest call of my career with my own wife on one of the aircraft in question." She didn't argue with me. She just nodded once and got to work. And I sat there under the amber glow of the operations floor, with my father's pen pressing quietly against my chest, waiting. The 2 hours that followed were the longest of my professional life, and they were made longer by the fact that my phone would not stop ringing with 2 entirely different kinds of urgency. Renee called first, 40 minutes in. "Strep came back negative," she said. "Blood work's pending, but the pediatrician thinks it's viral, probably running its course over the next day or 2. Fever's holding at 103, not climbing, but he's miserable, and he keeps asking for you." "Tell him I'm coming as soon as I can," I said, and heard how thin my own voice sounded saying it. "Darius," Renee's voice softened, "is this about the airline thing? The thing Dad used to do?" "It's exactly the thing Dad used to do," I said. "I'll explain when I can." The second call came from a number I didn't recognize, and when I picked it up, a woman's brisk, professional voice introduced herself as Camille Okafor, an attorney. "I'm calling on behalf of Simone Cole," she said. "I want to give you the courtesy of hearing this from me rather than a process server. Simone has retained my office regarding a trial separation. We'll be filing the initial paperwork within the week." I sat with that for a moment, watching the amber blip on the monitor that represented my wife's flight. somewhere over Alabama by now, carrying 41 people and a maintenance history that might or might not be a lie. Understood, I said, because there was nothing else honest to say. There's one more thing, Camille said, and something in her tone changed, grew more careful. Simone has asked me to note for the record that she is aware of your position within the airline's emergency operations structure, and that any action you take today involving flights she is scheduled on will be viewed and potentially characterized in future proceedings as retaliatory. I'm required to pass that along. I closed my eyes. Somewhere in the last 6 hours, my marriage had turned into evidence, and I hadn't even seen it happen. Ms. Okafor, I said, I want you to understand something, and I'd like it on whatever record you're keeping. I don't yet know if there's a safety issue with any aircraft today. If there is, I will act on it, regardless of who is seated where, because that is the entire purpose of the position I hold. If there isn't, nothing will happen at all. Either way, my son is running a 103-degree fever in a pediatrician's office right now, which is where my attention actually is. There was a pause on the line. I'll note that, she said, more quietly than before, and hung up. I sat back in the chair and pressed both hands flat against my face for a moment, and when I lowered them, Priya was standing in the doorway with a printout in her hand and an expression I didn't like at all. We have the independent chain, she said. Talk to me while you look at it. She spread the printout across the console. 5 tail numbers, 5 inspection reports, 5 sets of inspector badge numbers cross-referenced against actual facility access logs from the Hellbrook maintenance hangar. 3 of the 5 inspections were never performed, she said. The badge numbers on the sign-off sheets belong to inspectors who weren't even on site during the recorded inspection windows. 2 were on approved leave. 1 was in a completely different city for a certification course. Someone forged the sign-offs and backdated the paperwork to make it look like all 5 aircraft passed a full inspection cycle they never actually received. My stomach dropped in a way that had nothing to do with Simone at all, and everything to do with the 41 passengers currently 31,000 feet over Alabama on an aircraft that might never have been properly inspected. Who authorized the accelerated contract that put Hallbrook in charge of these inspections in the first place? I asked, though I already knew the answer waiting for me. Priya turned the page. There at the bottom of the original contract summary was the same name that had been sitting in the back of my mind since I first heard it that morning. Adrian Cross, listed as the aviation procurement consultant who had negotiated Hallbrook's accelerated maintenance package. The same contract that had apparently produced 5 falsified inspection records and put an unknown number of passengers at risk to save the airline money and make Adrian Cross look very good in front of a board that liked results more than it liked questions. He's the same person who... Priya stopped herself. Yes, I said. He's the man my wife left the airport with this morning. Neither of us said anything else about that for a moment. There wasn't anything useful to say. The personal and the professional had collided in the ugliest possible way, and now I had a decision in front of me that no amount of quiet was going to solve. I need independent sign-off before I move, I said, standing up. Get me the FAA regional liaison on the line, and get legal counsel into this room. I am not issuing a network hold on my authority alone, not with my own wife on one of these aircraft. If I do this, it gets done exactly by the book, with every step documented, or it doesn't get done at all. That'll take at least another hour to assemble, Priya said. Maybe 2. Then we don't have an hour to spare, I said, because 3 of those 5 aircraft could reach their next scheduled departure before we're done being careful. I picked up my phone to call Renee again, needing to hear that Micah was still stable, needing 10 seconds of my other life before I stepped fully into this one. She answered on the first ring this time, and her voice had a tightness in it that made my whole body go cold. "His fever spiked," she said. 104.1. The doctor wants to admit him overnight for observation and IV fluids just to be safe. He's asking for you, Darius. He keeps asking why you're not here. I stood in that glass command room with the weight of an entire network of aircraft in one hand and my son's small, frightened voice in the other. And for the first time all day, I understood exactly what my father must have felt every single time the phone rang at dinner. "Tell him I'm coming as soon as this is done," I said. "Tell him Daddy loves him, and I'll be there tonight, I promise." "I will," Renee said. "Darius, whatever this is, finish it. He'll understand when he's older. Right now, he just needs you to come home safe and not carrying something you couldn't put down." I hung up and stood alone for a moment at the glass wall overlooking the operations floor, watching amber lights move slowly across a map of the country, each one carrying people who trusted a system they would never see, run by men and women whose names they would never know. I thought about my father, buttoning his coat over a badge nobody at our dinner table ever asked about, telling me that quiet men keep the sky safe. I reached inside my lapel and touched the wing compass pin, small and cool under my fingers, and understood something for the first time that I don't think I'd ever let myself understand before. My father hadn't just taught me to be quiet. He'd taught me to be quiet and right at the same time. And somewhere along the way, I had let the quiet part crowd out the being right part, had let silence become an excuse for never standing up and saying out loud, "This is who I am, and this is what I know." I had let Simone believe I was small because I had never once shown her I wasn't. That wasn't dignity. That was fear wearing dignity's coat. If I was going to do this, if I was going to ground an entire regional network with my own wife's aircraft among them, I was not going to do it in silence. And I was not going to do it for revenge. I was going to do it exactly the way my father would have. Correctly, documented, defensible, and without a single word wasted on getting even. I walked back into the command room. Legal counsel had arrived, along with the FAA regional liaison on a video line, her face steady and unbothered on the monitor, the calm of someone who had clearly done this before. "Walk me through what you have," she said. I did. I gave her every timestamp, every mismatched badge number, every falsified sign-off, laid out clean and without a hint of anything personal in my voice, though everyone in that room now understood exactly what was personal about it. "That's sufficient grounds for a precautionary hold on all 5 tail numbers, pending physical reinspection," the liaison said. "I'll authorize FAA concurrence on my end. This is your call to execute, Mr. Cole, but the finding supports it fully." Legal counsel, a measured man named Whitfield, nodded once beside me. "For the record," he said, "I want it noted that Mr. Cole disclosed his personal connection to a passenger on one of the affected aircraft before initiating this action, and requested independent verification specifically because of that connection. That's the opposite of misconduct. That's the process working exactly as it should." I looked at Priya. She nodded. I picked up the command line that fed directly into every affected carrier's dispatch desk, and my voice, when it came out, was steadier than I expected it to be. "This is Darius Cole, Acting Director of Network Integrity and Emergency Operations Command. Authorization code Charlie 7902. Effective immediately. Ground the network. No departures for the 5 flagged tail numbers, and no departures for any aircraft serviced under the Holbrook Aerostructures maintenance contract until independent physical reinspection is complete. Any aircraft currently airborne under this contract is to be flagged for priority ground inspection immediately upon landing, no exceptions, including Flight 412 to Dallas." There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause that happens when a dispatcher realizes the man giving the order has just included his own wife's flight in the same breath as everyone else's, without hesitation, without special treatment either way. "Copy, Command," the dispatcher said. "Grounding the network. Estimated impact, 31 flights. Approximately 2,200 passengers across 5 affected tail numbers and connected rotations." "Copy," I said, and set the receiver down, and felt the room exhale around me, the way a room does when a decision that could have gone a dozen different ways has finally, cleanly, gone the right one. Flight 412 to Dallas was diverted to the nearest available airport with maintenance capacity, a regional field 40 minutes short of its original destination, and held on the tarmac for priority ground inspection before any passenger was permitted to deplane. I did not go to meet that flight. I want to be honest about that, too. Some version of this story, told a different way, might have me standing at the gate when Simone walked off that plane, watching her face change when she learned whose authority had turned her flight around. That isn't what happened, and it isn't what I wanted to happen. I stayed in the command room until the last of the 5 tail numbers was accounted for and grounded, because that was the job, and the job was the reason any of this mattered in the first place. Adrian Cross, it turned out, did not have the luxury of staying calm the way I did. Within 2 hours of the network hold going into effect, Holbrook's owner, facing federal scrutiny and a frozen contract, produced internal emails showing Adrian had pressured the maintenance shop to backdate sign-offs on at least 3 occasions over the preceding 4 months in order to hit turnaround deadlines that made his negotiated contract look like a spectacular cost-saving success to the board that had hired him. He had known, or should have known, that the shortcuts he was pushing were not clerical conveniences. They were falsified safety records on commercial aircraft carrying real passengers. He was removed from the Dallas flight by airport security before it was ever cleared to release its passengers, escorted off separately, and by that evening the airline's board had suspended the Holbrook contract entirely, pending a full federal investigation into the falsified inspection records. Simone called me 4 hours after the network hold went into effect, once she'd been rebooked onto a replacement flight and finally had cell service again. I let it ring twice before I answered. "You grounded my flight," she said. Not a question. Her voice was tight, controlled, the voice she used for people she was angry with but couldn't afford to yell at. "I grounded 5 aircraft with falsified maintenance records," I said. "Yours happened to be one of them. So were 30 others." "Do you have any idea how this looks? My attorney already thinks—" "Simone." I kept my voice level, the way I'd kept it all day. "Adrian falsified safety inspections on commercial aircraft to make his contract numbers look good. That's not a custody strategy. That's a federal investigation. I'd be very careful about what you say on his behalf right now to anyone, including your attorney." There was a long silence on the line. When she spoke again, some of the control had gone out of her voice. "Adrian told me the maintenance program was ahead of schedule," she said, quieter now. "He said the delays were bureaucratic. I didn't know he was—" She stopped. "I believe you didn't know," I said, and I meant it. "I don't believe you looked very hard, either." I heard her breath catch on the other end. "You could have told me who you really are," she said. "Any time in the last 5 years, you could have just told me." "I could have," I said. "I kept waiting for you to see it without me having to say it. That was my mistake, Simone, and I'll own it. But you left our sick son with me at a gate this morning and walked onto a plane with another man without once asking if I was even capable of handling it. That wasn't about what I never told you. That was about what you'd already decided about me a long time before today." She didn't have an answer for that, and for once, neither of us tried to force one. "How is he?" she asked finally, and her voice cracked just slightly on the question, the first honest thing she'd said since the gate that morning. "Admitted overnight for fluids and observation," I said. "Fever spiked to 104.1. He's stable. He's asking for both of us." "I'll come straight from the airport," she said. "I'd like that," I said, and I meant that too. Because whatever was broken between Simone and me, our son was not a casualty either of us was willing to accept. By the time I reached the pediatric ward that night, it was nearly 9 p.m., and Micah was sitting up in a hospital bed too big for him, an IV taped gently to the back of his small hand, watching cartoons with the particular exhausted stillness of a child who has had a very long day. Renee was in the chair beside him, and she stood the moment she saw me, squeezing my arm on her way out to give us privacy. "Daddy," Micah said, and his whole face opened up in a way that undid something tight in my chest that had been wound since gate C-17 that morning. "Hey, buddy." I sat carefully on the edge of the bed and pulled him gently against my side, mindful of the IV line. "I heard you gave everybody a good scare today." "I was really hot," he said solemnly, "and Mommy left." There it was, the sentence I had been bracing for all day, delivered in the plain, devastating way only a 5-year-old can manage. "I know, buddy," I said, "but I didn't leave. And I'm not going anywhere tonight. I'm staying right here with you." He reached over, small fingers tugging at my coat lapel the way he had at the gate that morning, and found the pin again, running his thumb over the little compass shape. "What's this again?" he asked. "You said it was Grandpa's." "It was," I said. "It's what he wore to remind himself of something important." "What?" I thought about how to say it in words a 5-year-old could hold on to. That being quiet and being brave aren't opposites, I said. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding everything together. But you still have to say the true thing out loud when it matters, even if you'd rather just stay quiet. He nodded like that made perfect sense, the way kids do with things adults spend decades failing to understand, and within a few minutes, his eyes had gone heavy and he was asleep against my shoulder, the cartoon still murmuring on low in the background. Simone arrived a little after 10, still in her travel clothes, her pastel coat replaced by a plain gray sweater, her bun loosened, most of the polish worn off her by a day that had gone nothing like she'd planned. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching Micah sleep against me, and something in her face, for the first time in longer than I could remember, looked genuinely uncertain. "Can I sit with him?" she asked. "Of course," I said, and shifted so she could take the chair beside the bed. And for a few minutes, neither of us said anything at all, just watched our son breathe, easy and even now, his fever finally starting to break under the fluids and the medication. "I've been thinking the whole flight home," she said quietly, not looking at me, "about what I said to you at the gate, about hiding in back rooms." "You weren't entirely wrong," I said. "I did hide. I told myself it was humility. Some of it probably was. Some of it was just fear that if I ever really let you see all of it, you'd realize you didn't want it." "That's not why she started, then stopped and pressed her lips together and tried again. More honestly this time. "I wanted to be married to someone people were impressed by when I said his name at a party. That's an ugly thing to admit, but it's true. And Adrian made me feel like that person was possible. I didn't ask enough questions about how." "I know," I said. "I heard about the emails." She flinched, just slightly. "I'm not asking you to forgive that," she said. "I'm not even sure I'm asking for anything. I watched an entire airline stop moving today because of a decision you made. And it wasn't for me, and it wasn't against me either. It was just right. I don't think I ever let myself imagine you were capable of something that large, because you never once made me imagine it. And I think I punished you for a quietness I never actually tried to understand. You didn't leave a weak man at that gate this morning, Simone," I said. And I said it without anger, without triumph, just as plainly and honestly as I knew how. You left a quiet one. Those were never the same thing. I let you believe they were for years, because it was easier than proving you wrong. That's on me, too." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, careful not to wake Micah. "What happens now?" she asked. "Camille Okafor files her paperwork," I said. "We do this the right way, for his sake. Custody arrangement that puts him first, not either of our egos. I'm not interested in punishing you through him, Simone. I never was, no matter what your attorney wants to put on the record." "I know that now," she said. "I think some part of me knew it even at the gate this morning. I was just too far into my own anger to let myself see it." We sat there a while longer, two people who had built and then slowly dismantled a life together, watching our son sleep between us. And for the first time since I'd stood at that gate that morning, With his fever soaking through my shirt, I felt something in my chest settle instead of tighten. Not resolution, not exactly, just the quiet, steady beginning of it. The federal investigation into Hallbrook Aerostructures and Adrian Cross took the better part of the following year, and it ended the way these things usually do, when the evidence is clean and the paper trail is honest. With Adrian barred from federal aviation contracts for a decade, Hallbrook's leadership replaced, and a new, tighter verification protocol put in place across every carrier that had used their services. One that would outlast all three of us and quietly protect passengers who would never know any of our names. Simone and I finalized our separation 4 months later, calm and unremarkable in exactly the way I'd hoped it would be, with a custody arrangement built entirely around what Micah needed rather than what either of us wanted to prove. We are not close, Simone and I. Not anymore. But we are civil, and more than that, we are honest with each other now, in a way we never quite managed while we were married. Sometimes the ending of something teaches you the thing you should have practiced the whole time it was alive. On a clear Saturday morning, about 6 months after that day at the gate, I took Micah out to a small grass airfield an hour outside the city. The kind of place where retired instructors let their old, single-engine planes taxi past a chain-link fence while families spread blankets on the grass to watch. He was 6 by then, steadier on his feet. The fever and the fear of that day long faded into just another story I would tell him when he was older. We sat on the hood of my car, sharing a bag of pretzels, watching a little yellow trainer plane climb slow and easy into a blue morning sky. "Dad," he said, "can I hold the pen again?" I reached inside my coat and unpinned it carefully and set it in his open palm. He turned it over the way he always did, tracing the little compass needle etched into the metal. "Not yet," I told him before he could ask the question I could see forming on his face. "One day it'll be yours to keep, not because you're my son, because you'll understand what it actually means by then." "What does it mean?" he asked, for maybe the 20th time since that hospital bed, and I gave him, for maybe the 20th time, a slightly larger piece of the honest answer. "It means you can be the quiet one in the room," I said, "and still be the one who stands up when it matters most. It means silence isn't the same thing as smallness, and it never was. But it also means you don't get to hide behind the quiet forever. Sooner or later, you have to say the true thing out loud, especially to the people you love, especially when it's hard." He handed the pen back to me, careful with it the way you're careful with something you don't yet understand you're going to inherit, and turned back to watch the little yellow plane bank slow and graceful against the sky. I pinned it back inside my coat, close to my chest, the way my father wore his, the way I imagine Micah will wear his own one day. And I thought about everything that had happened since that morning at Gate C-17. The humiliation, the fever, the falsified records, the network grounded on my word alone, the marriage that ended the way it had to end. None of it had been about proving Simone wrong. It had never been about revenge. Not once. Not even at the very end when I had every reason in the world to want it. It had only ever been about learning, finally, at 42 years old, that the sky doesn't forgive the people who stay quiet when they know the truth. And neither, in the end, can you. Quiet men can still keep the world safe. but only if, when it finally matters most, they're brave enough to say what they know out loud.